Ian, which move caught your eye the most and why?
Well, it's boring, but you obviously have to go for Dominic Raab getting sent to justice. Buckland was one of the few. I mean, he wasn't good exactly, but he was at least on the more moderate end of the spectrum. I mean, you saw, for a long time they were like, we're going to attack judicial review. And they did attack judicial review. But in the end, with these various ouster clauses that he did, it was all pretty incremental, quite slow. It wasn't this kind of burn it all down approach that we saw from Priti Patel and from others. So on that, you thought, well, okay, so, this ain't great. It's walking in the wrong direction, but it's not, fucking running at it, all guns blazing. So, to swap him out for Raab is a problem. Raab has a very long history of wanting to attack the Human Rights Act, European Convention of Human Rights, from which it originates. There's some restraint on him by virtue of, ironically, the Brexit deal they themselves signed, but not that much restraint that they can't start doing some very serious fucking about. But more than that, it was just this sense of just moral despair at, a way of running a country where the justice system, the national justice system, is considered a consolation prize that you throw out to someone when they've catastrophically fucked up in another department. So that in itself is quite hard to swallow. My main thoughts were really with what it says for the election. You certainly get the sense that this is the team that will lead the Tories into the next election. That doesn't mean we need to get over it, sort of excited and think, well, that definitely means it's happening in the next year. I mean, probably it is, going to be happening according to the timetable that we thought of sometime in 2023. Probably in May 2023. But even looking at it, because it involved some big names, and because I think surprisingly, figures like Williamson actually went to the back benches rather than being given another position on the front bench. People sort of thought, well, this is actually quite a meaty, big one. I mean, but ultimately, when you look at it, the vast majority of people are staying in place. It's really just a handful. I mean, literally sort of a handful of sort of big names that have shifted around. And it looks like an election footing. And it's not entirely, I mean, most of the time you can just about see the argument, obviously not with Nadine Dorries. I suppose with Nadine Dorries, you would say she's written a book and she's been on reality TV. So therefore she understands culture.
No. Sorry, still too soon. Still too soon.
Who? We'll come back in a month and we'll do a special related emergency podcast on that topic. I mean, with Buckland, you can't. Buckland's just the victim of being someone who is fairly harmless, so he had to go to make way.
So you think there is some credibility to the speculation that Buckland, basically, the main reason he wants is to make a vacancy to demote Raab into?
Oh, absolutely. No, he's done nothing. I mean, look at the other people that have been chucked out. I mean, Gavin Williamson hasn't made it through, I don't think, a single month in that post without a really major scandal against him. The same with, Generic, who's been pursued by sleaze allegations. I mean, that is just not the case for Buckland, whichever way you look at it. I mean, he had a pretty clean record. He was shifted out, in order to get Raab there. Liz Truss, you can argue that the same thing is happening to her that once happened to Boris Johnson, which is you're flying quite high. Admittedly, astonishing to me that someone of her caliber could be considered to be flying high, but she is. So you put her in the Foreign Office, which is, makes you feel really good about yourself, one of the great offices of state, but is well off to the side where you can't make too much of a mess of things, unless, of course, your military operations in Afghanistan happen to end while you're on holiday. And really, that was what Theresa May did with Boris Johnson. It didn't work for Theresa May, funnily enough. I think it probably would work for Boris Johnson. But this looks like an election team to me. And in fact, when you see the stuff that was in the Telegraph, and in fact, look at what's happening with Oliver Dowden being sent as, as chairman, and stuff together. That looks like you're thinking, right, we're going for an election, probably 2023. I mean, that makes sense from where we are right now.
Do any of the appointments signal a change in policy, do you think? Or are they just a change of personnel?
You see, Gove was good in justice. This is the thing we always sort of end up clinging to. He was, when you give him this department well away from stuff, he would actually typically approach it in a fairly sort of, I mean, I know teachers will resent me saying this because of how he was at the Department of Education, but he'll spend an awful lot of time talking to people, very often experts, despite what he went on to say, and then come to a solution. But it's when he had control over a department. I think what's going to mess him up with levelling up is you don't have a little fiefdom. You're essentially in a coordination position across government on some really difficult, expensive, projects that would take a very long time, several parliaments in order to fulfill. And on that, you just can't see that he's going to be able to deliver on any of it, really. I think it's a hospital pass, really.
Yeah.
Ian, I don't want to say there are tons of better people on the Tory backbenches, but there are certainly smarter people. There are more experienced people. There are sort of bigger beasts. There are people who have spoken with integrity on various issues, most recently Afghanistan, and they have been largely ignored. And the one common strand that I can see in these appointments is that they're all Johnson fans. Are there actually advantages to a servile cabinet, even though we hate its direction? Is it actually quite a smart move to just have a cabinet of idiots that just nod along?
People often say that. I mean, you often find sort of kind of august, grave commentators sort of say this sort of thing. And I just think that's just completely wrong as a functioning principle of how to run any organization. Yeah. What you want is people who disagree and have an independent mind to put their case. I mean, it's your job then, if you're the boss, to have the authority to, in the end, make a decision. But you want to be filled with people who raise problems, who raise objections. That's how you see, even on just a basic policy processing level, the flaws in policy, the errors in things that you're doing, rather than just closing yourself in, what's frankly an echo chamber. And it's like, look, we lost a lot of talent from the Tory benches at the last election during the purge. Any really sort of impressive One Nation people, but there's still people there, like you say, who are impressive, like Tom Tugendhat. I mean, most of them are, sort of in the select committee system. But you see them across. I mean, even Robert Halfon, Neil O'Brien. I mean, there's David Davis right there. He's got all the credentials on Brexit. I mean, imagine in some well, not an ideal world, my least of all the bad realistic worlds. You'd have David Davis in the Home Office. But that is just, it's not considered possible. There are all from this very...
There are people basically who would improve the decision making. There are people who would make a positive contribution to whatever needs to be thrashed out in cabinet, and they're just not there. Ian, okay, let me just prepare myself. Nadine Dorries, there, I said it.
Oh, well done. We are doing well today.
A woman,
9 o'clock.
A woman who famously took off on a full MP salary without telling her constituents or her party to go eat kangaroo arse on reality TV, is now in charge of the Department for Culture, Media, Digital and Sport. Is this the day's trolling appointment, basically, on the same day Jess Brammer is formally appointed head of BBC News, or is there more to it?
First of all, can we just quickly say the Jess Brammer news is very, very good news. And it was really encouraging in the middle of watching that reshuffle to see it happen. And it's not just good news, by the way, because for her, although, all the evidence you hear from journalists around her, she stands up for her journalists. That's what she's done. And that's the kind of activity you want in journalism. It's good news on a basic institutional level of the fact that the BBC is demonstrating enough spine to commit to that appointment, despite getting the fucking full salvo attack from the Daily Mail and from others and from government ministers. So that really, really was very good news. I was genuinely pleased by that. Nadine Dorries is a trolling appointment, but the thing is, the Secretary of State in that job is essentially the Secretary of State for culture war trolling, right? That's what they're meant to do, and in fact, and I think in an effective way. I think that is something that the membership of the Tory Party likes, but to a certain extent, the potential voters of the Tory Party likes. Now we know her record on this; it's very, very fucking long. She is at least she is just as stupid as she makes out to be, and and her politics are just as twisted and foolhardy as she states them to be. She's not pretending as Boris Johnson is. I mean, I really think she is what she presents herself as, and she will complain about wokeness and the BBC and on and snowflake. She will use all of these words without even quote marks. She will be exactly that, and that is not an accident. That is why she has been put into that position. So, I mean, I think if we thought Dowden was bad, and Dowden was, I mean, that was some fucking very quietly, very subtly in these little letters he was writing to charity. That was some fan level filth that he was.
Yeah, he was the one that really surprised me of the last cabinet, actually, by how awful, as in abrasive, he was, because I didn't expect it. I thought he was, because of his mild manner, he gives a completely different impression, but he was actually a top troll. A final question to both of you. Most junior appointments have not been announced yet, but any rumors or any that have been announced that have caught your eye? And the second part to that, is there anyone that should have reshuffled off the ministerial coil but didn't?
Well, all of them.
Yes, but this is not your government, Ian. So in those parameters, is there someone that's, Priti Patel is a very obvious example of someone that has a bad record, but is there any other ins or expected outs that didn't happen that surprised either of you?
I don't think so. I mean, to be honest, to give some sort of semblance of credit, I mean, this is the lowest credit you could imagine, because people should be sacked when they can't do the job. We shouldn't have to wait years for them to be quietly reshuffled out. But, even just getting rid of Williamson in general, I mean, shows a bit more decisiveness and willingness to get rid of sort of failures than Boris Johnson has shown so far. This is as decisive as we've seen him be. It's not very decisive. It still results with, Dominic Raab coming out as if he's a Game of Thrones character, just covered in job titles. but nevertheless, it's also some element of decisiveness. And you look down the rest of the list, and there are people who are. I mean, Theresa Coffey, for instance. Theresa Coffey looks like she's been in cabinet, on and off for a very long time now, and throughout the entirety of that period, she looks like she's been half asleep. And it's not good. What is happening under her watch is not good, and it looks like an absolute problem waiting to hit her, especially on universal credit. But you're nowhere near that sort of the Williamson level of just, you can wake up on a Monday morning and you can be damn sure his name will be in the newspapers somewhere for having catastrophically fucked something up.
The flip side to that, of course, is that for 2 years, this Prime Minister thought that Gavin Williamson was still the right person to lead schools through a pandemic. To shuffle him out at the tail end of that seems to me quite a strange decision.
And that no one else was really sacked, because God forbid that there would actually be standards that you would hold ministers accountable to and for. And of course, the Prime Minister himself would probably fall foul of those immediately, so just can't be seen to sack. Hence why he's had to pretzel himself into various different shapes with giving Raab all these different appointments.
Yes, and can I quickly add to that, actually? There's a bit of a weird twist, really, with those jobs that he's given to Raab. Because if he's Lord Chancellor, he's supposed to be protecting the independence of the judiciary, right? And one of the things you protect the judiciary from is the executive. But the other job title he got given was Deputy Prime Minister. So you're right that, I know they'll do it as which hat are you wearing today, as if, he's just so judicious and so disinterested that he can stand above it all. But you're like, really, if you have some proper sort of constitutional respect, you would not be sticking these job titles together.
I'll tell you what, I'd like to contribute one name very quickly to the conversation who is expert at staying out of the firing line. Grant Shapps. I think he's done a truly awful job as Secretary of State for Transport. A lot of what is going on right now with shortages with HGV drivers is entirely his fault to see it coming and deal with it. And there he is on a sort of 2-minute appointment with a PM and came out beaming smiles. So there you go.
A travel system that you need a PhD to try and understand whether you're allowed to go on holiday.